today will allow you to have some hands-on session. On the screen here, there's a sign up. I believe it's also part of your registration. If you have not, if you have issues or any concerns of trying to get the travel account, our friendly moderator, my colleagues, they should be helping you. If you can post your questions on the chat window. Yep. Just going to the agenda proper today. So we will be looking at a fair bit of topics, broad topics. Like, for example, I think the first one we're looking at what is the driving factor for API today? What has changed, and what are the architects, the businesses, the consumers are looking at as well. We will dive into a bit in terms of the platform, a fair bit of introduction of the Apigee platform. And if you look at it, the rest of the pointers today focus on API lifecycle management, which Apigee actually has covers probably one of the leading in terms of the entire lifecycle management in terms of API. And last but not least is we'll jump into some hands-on session. Today is part 1. We have part 2 tomorrow as well. I guess this is very familiar to folks today. We used to have very simple application, right? We have a front end that could be a thick client, it could be just basic web browser talking to the back end directly. With all your systems of records, could be a bank account, could be your CRM, should be your customer profile, even your individual HR profile, right? But things have changed because there's a ever demand for connected experience, such as today we no longer just work with a PC. Today we could be using the same, trying to access the same service through the mobile phone, through a web browser, through an iPad, anything. Nowadays we even talk about IoT, connecting your devices as part of a shopping experience, where I could even have my shopping cart talking to the backend system, right? So there is a gap today where all this different experience needs to talk to and connect to the backend. And we all know that a lot of this legacy system that is holding the system records are not that flexible. So IT deliveries or deliverables has been struggling to keep up with the demand of the consumer. So that's where there's some of the criteria that we look at, right? The new demands are looking at how do I scale, because in the traditional context, I only talk to one system, and it's very easy to make sure that the system that I'm working with is a trusted source, and I can secure that connected channel directly, and it's very easy to manage. And at the same time, there's a need to scale, right? Because we are expecting more users from the front end, more devices connecting to the user, from the front end to the back end, getting more systems. And as you scale, you need to be able to manage, because we no longer just manage one platform and multiple platforms. And at the same time, we also need to work with, as an IT shop, working with business, working with consumers. You need to provide some visibility of what's happening, what's the utilization, how's my performance of my app today, what's my customer experience. All these are part of the analyze stage, right? At the same time, how do I get this on the hands of the developer today? Developers are getting more and more valuable. How do I make all this experience seamless? This is where the API management platform comes into play. Because if I go back one slide and say, how do I manage all these individual entities separately? It's going to be challenging, right? So what API management platform does is an approach to encapsulate all these various entities or various operation concerns into one single platform. So what does it mean to an IT developer? What does it mean to the business? Now I have a way of centralizing all these concerns, number one. Number two is I have a way to provide a secure an endpoint that is easy to use, and as a developer or app developer, I'm actually abstracted all the complexity of the backend, which what the ESB was actually meant to do. But what API management comes into play is it helps you to do some form of security on your behalf, provide standards around it, and at the same time helps to collect performance analytics and tell you how's the endpoint that you're consuming performing. What should you be doing? How should you be improving if a customer or a user of your application complains that, look, I think your system or your application is not responsive, it's actually affecting the customer experience. What should we be doing, right? So all this are actually centralized and managed within API management platform itself. So what you can see is with this abstraction, it helps to reduce the delivery cycle. As what we say that today, whatever the request has been put into the business is always, I need yesterday. So how do I speed it up, right? So API management is a way to abstract, aggregate, and accelerate some of this delivery, especially around the channels and experience of new development. And as we all know, the development of channels has been ongoing for, 10, 20 years, right? But API has now become the first language of channel. Why? If you get all these snippets of articles, if you look at things like the power transformation of the web, which is API ecosystem and democratizing of machine intelligence. So what API is not only doing is speeding up delivery, speeding up the development of applications or connected experience. It's also trying to abstract complicated ecosystem per se, right? So machine learning, and there's always this struggle of getting enough AI machine learning expertise, right, to develop applications. API is a means of why not we have a department that builds that core competency and use API as an exposure where it becomes easy and it becomes consumable, right? So if you look at all this snippets, it's really looking at how do I centralize some of the core competency. It could be machine learning, it could be security. How do I spend most of my effort building new channels and delivery, right? So this is where API becomes increasingly become the mainstream and mainstay for all. It becomes the first language of application development today. First is always what API should I be delivering. It's not used to be what UI should I be delivering. So at the same time, even Google itself is a big advocate of API. So literally all digital transactions in Google network. If you look at it, we are looking at 10 billion API calls per second. More than, I think this is more than what we can read in terms of numbers. But so that's where the scalability of the platforms is important. There are two things, right? The scalability of platforms, because as your API becomes popular, the demand for internal systems increases. At the same time, as your API becomes popular, you have to make it more user-friendly as well, because as the API program evolves, developers will demand more from what they're consuming as part of the API. So hence, we have this step-by-step transformation, or you can look at it from a perspective of what is my journey of developing an API, right? Because typical journey. The very first step is access, right? So how do I provide access to a backend system? So REST architecture is what the general API is built on today. That's all because it's flexible and it's lightweight, right? Versus the older days of XML and SOAP, which is heavy and complicated to manage, and it requires a lot of compute power, right? Because we will not be able to know what kind of devices that is consuming your API. It's not just the phone. Some of the low-end IoT devices which have minimum compute power might not be able to handle. So hence, REST and JSON is actually a good combination for a lightweight payload for consuming an API or developing an API. So once we do that, we look at integration, emergence of cloud-based integration, because as we mentioned, as I mentioned earlier, the demand for delivery has increased, and cloud is not the only, but it's one of the ways to provide a platform to scale. And once we have all the hygiene factor, right? For example, like we have making the API easily accessible, ability to integrate. We focus on experience. What kind of experience is my customer expecting from the organization? If you are in retail, you'll be looking at how many channels should I be providing? How do I make sure the various channels that the customer is coming in using my website has a consistent experience? They're able to do the same thing, like they're able to do a checkout, they're able to do browsing. Same for banking, right? It shouldn't be too much difference of doing banking on the web, doing banking on the app, and sometimes some of those channels are also emulating services that we can do on the branch itself, right? So this is where experience comes in. And last but not least is where the utopia is, right? How do I use an API or the API strategy or the API program to transform not just the IT system or IT ecosystem within my organization? The transformation is also around how do I use API to transform my business, or transform my business of how I am interacting with my consumer today. Why transformation is important? We all know that we are in this trying times where a lot of folks are working from home, a lot of physical movement is restricted, but online retail is still ongoing, right? So how do I use this opportunity to transform my business to adapt to the new norm, we call it? This new norm is going to be ongoing maybe for a period of time, right? So how do I use my business, which is maybe not there yet or already on the journey of transformation? How do I even expand this, right? So this is where API, not just an API, but a whole suite of API platform and program itself will help to accelerate some of this transformation within the organization. That could be business model that you could be pushing out, which the business didn't imagine in the first place. Maybe let's look at some examples of transformation that our customer has done. Right? For example, on the left-hand side, we focus on app modernization and IT agility. For example, like T-Mobile. T-Mobile is one of our longest customers who has been with us for a couple of years. The initial objective of T-Mobile was how do I transform my internal system, my integration platform, to be more agile? Because they were looking at, I'm running a ESB which has thousands of web servers. It comes to a point that it's very hard to deliver. It comes to a point where I don't have the IT organization doesn't have clear visibility of the assets that's available. And when the new request comes in, do I have the service or do I need to build the service, right? So because of the legacies that's built up over the years and the complexity, and as well as because there's a lot of silos within the organization, it creates a lot of redundancy and overhead and duplicates, right? So what T-Mobile did was embark on a journey on an API program, streamlining thousands of web services, SOAP web services, and moving them into APIs. So by doing that first step, what they've done is they have reduced the API footprint from the SOAP web service footprint by 90%. So when they finished that project a couple of years back, they have moved from 2,000 over services into 150 web JSON API itself. So what happens is now they have a clear visibility of what is available today, and because as part of the API management, one of the key things is how do I make my internal assets or internal catalog visible? How do I make it descriptive where anyone can come to a catalog, read up the catalog, understand the documentation, and be able to make sense whether does this API suitable for my requirements? Do I need to change or do I need to combine, right? So this is what T-Mobile has done. With that, they have increased their operational productivity, right? Because now they no longer need to manage thousands and thousands of services and manage a smaller set of APIs. And they have provided a means of self-service mechanism for their internal developers. So that frees up that integration platform team to do more things in terms of engineering, in terms of putting in best practice, ensuring the platform they put up is secure today. And what they have done is they push the platform further and say that they have what we call a campaign. They actually use the same platform to provide what we call Tuesday and T-Mobile, where they actually beat the telco market in the US, where they are one of the only one who's pushing new marketing campaign every Tuesday without fail. And that's the speed they're looking at in terms of delivering new capability, new service, and even new experiences for their customers. So same here for digital, for the middle segment, but we talk about digital customer engagement. Shutterfly, I'm not sure anyone, I believe most of the audience might have browsed photos on the internet, and you might have seen some photographers, they actually upload their photos to sell. Shutterfly is one of the main platforms where photographers put in their pictures to sell. And what Shutterfly did was they want to develop new channels rather than folks coming in and buy a bunch of photos through the web. They create an API around that services. Why? Because they could use it from what we call a time-based or a request-based API on pictures on demand for some of the customers that they're working with, right? But the thing is, the model might not have changed, right? They're still buying a bundle, but they can have multiple downloads. But what has changed for them is now I can actually provide an endpoint for some of these marketing companies to get a download of a couple of photos and get it refreshed over time. All this through an automation by an API. But the subscription model don't change. So what Shutterfly has done is by having an existing API platform, for them, it's like a kind of minimum change. Would not have before that, right? So same here for the developer ecosystem. One of our key customers who look at most of our phone, we will have weather. AccuWeather is one of the key weather providers in terms of statistics. They built an API platform where today if you need and weather forecast on your application, chances are you'll be using AccuWeather to provide that weather information as part of your application. But one thing to note for Walgreens, which is one of the U.S. pharmacies, right? So what they've done is initially they venture into photo printing. But because of the prevalence of mobile phone, less and less people are printing photos. So they have a business idea. Why not I build an API around providing services for folks to send their photos to the photo printer and pick it up from the shop. So what they have done is they have included the online photo printing experience into their in-store experience, because now I can print it. Now I can print not just on a photo, I can send things like my my prescription, and I can pick it up then. So I no longer need to wait for the pharmacist to to gather my prescription. They can actually get it from there. Same thing, they can actually then pick it up. And at the same time, what Walgreens has also noticed was two things. One is the foot traffic to the shop has increased tremendously. Second is they have built a ecosystem for photo printing. Today we have this Instagram. Folks sometimes like to print very specific type of photos, and they could able to cater to that. But what happens is a lot of these developers, maybe small-time developers, make use of this API to enhance or aggregate services between Instagram, between printing service, and their own services as well, even name cards, right? So this is why. So earlier we talked about transformation. These are some of the customers who have actually embarked on API journey and have actually done a fair bit of transformation within not just the organization, and also how they actually engage their customers. In terms of statistics, they build an API platform where today if you need and whether maybe what we need, we will delve in a bit deeper in terms of Apigee as a platform that provides and